good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you all. So I'm just going to dive right into it in terms of the topic that we have for today. And I will sort of preface what I have to say by saying that in my experience, one of the key issues that we encounter at the very outset of even dealing with fashion business is the fact that, as you probably all know, a lot of fashion brands, fashion designers really tend to focus on the design and creative aspects of their businesses. Whereas that aspect only contributes, in my opinion, about 10% to the running of a successful business. And so one of the things that I've sort of, begun to develop is a kind of, can we sort of mute everyone? There's some noise. Yeah, thank you. Right, so what I've, sort of begun to do is to create a curriculum around fashion business, really, around the business of fashion, and just really beginning to help fashion brands to look at how they can start to create sustainable businesses, albeit creative enterprises. And so the model, the framework that I've developed is kind of, threefold, and I'm just going to, I know I only have 30 minutes, I may not even take that long, but we'll see how we go. So I have like a sort of three-part framework that I'm going to share with everyone today. And the first part, I think, is something that we often take for granted, which is kind of the why of the business. So I like to start with what I call first principles. So what is the actual vision of this business in the first place, right? What is the vision? What is the mission statement? So what is this grand, big idea that you want to bring out into the world? Because we have fashion brands all over the place. Like, again, fashion is an industry where, or at least fashion design is an industry where, at least in Africa, there's quite a low barrier to entry. Anyone can just, have a creative flair and just call themselves a fashion designer. So as opposed to beginning to have like all of these copycat brands, for me, it's really important at the outset to establish the why. What do you see? What is this big grand idea that you want to bring into the world that nobody else has done? Or what do you want to bring into the world that may have been done before, but you want to add a different spin to? So that's kind of where I tend to start. And then what is the mission? Like, what do you actually want to do? Like, so you might have this grand vision, but how do you intend to execute that? And then sort of going on to identifying like what the strategic objectives are, which now then begins to break things into smaller parts to see, right, okay, in the midst of this grand vision and this grand vision's mission statement, here are the particular objectives that I want my particular business to be driven by. And then I sort of look at the, at the values. What kind of values do I want my, my company to be driven by? And what kind of culture do I want to create? So for me personally, I run a factory, as Liz said at the outset. And one of the things that was very clear to me from the get-go is, okay, I'll just go back a little bit. So as you would have heard, I'm a lawyer by training, and I worked in, several law firms and financial institutions as well. And in some of those places, the work culture was just so high octane and actually quite toxic in some instances. And I was very determined that I knew what I didn't want to create in my own company. I didn't want to create an environment that people would be afraid to come to work, or people would feel tense to come to work. I wanted to create a place, an environment where people actually enjoyed the work that they do, even though they were putting in all of their energy or efforts into that. So that was really important for me. So anyways, so that's kind of, that's the first block that I start with. And then I think it's really important because I think that sometimes, fashion brands and fashion designers tend to, we've probably all seen this, have an idea of what they want to create and just kind of jump into this, creative activity without really sitting down to plan what the business would look like. And so I have this like sort of, 9-point approach that I take in terms of, and I use it for like for many different things in terms of just really beginning to identify and to clarify in my mind's eye what this business is going to be doing, how is it going to make money, who am I going to work with, what are the what are the different sort of channels through which I'm going to distribute my product, and so on. So I'm going to just sort of run through that. So firstly, I think it's really important to identify what the key activities are. What are you going to be doing? Are you just going to be designing? Are you going to outsource production? Are you going to produce in-house? What are the key activities that you're going to be? And this is sort of like a classic business model, sort of canvas. So what are the key activities? What are you actually going to be doing in this business? What are the different things? Are you going to be producing garments? Are you going to be producing accessories? How is that whole business process going to run internally? What are the different sort of problems that you're solving through that business that you want to set up? So that's the first thing, actually identifying and clarifying and articulating what am I going to be doing with this fashion brand. And and it might sound really simple. Again, many of the things, I like to keep things simple because, I feel like we often miss the simple things and just really move on to, more seemingly complex ideas. But, like, as I said, it's just really understanding what am I going to be doing and just really setting that out in great detail, in sort of, bullet points, here's what I'm going to be doing, and just sort of making it clear. The next thing for me is now then to kind of look at, okay, so here's what I'm going to be doing. Who do I need to work with for this to happen? Who are the sort of, key suppliers? Who are the key partners that I need to, to work with? Do I need to partner with, or, like who are my suppliers going to be? Am I going to, I beg your pardon, am I going to source fabric or materials locally? Am I importing fabric or other materials from abroad? What does that process look like, right? Do I need to partner with logistics companies, for example, to do deliveries for me? Who do I need to partner with? Basically, do I need to partner with the production company, either locally or overseas, to be able to produce my garments, etc. So just basically, mining the field of, okay, I've identified what it is that I want to do. Who do I need to partner with to actually make that come to pass? And that's kind of that. And then I then sort of move on to, okay, so I have that on lockdown. I know what I'm going to be producing or what I'm going to be offering, but what is my sort of primary or special or unique value proposition? So there are many fashion brands doing many different things. What am I doing that's different? What am I sort of bringing to the market that that would make people actually want to patronize me? What am I bringing to the market that would make people want to kind of abandon their preferred suppliers or their preferred brands and then patronize me instead? Am I sort of selling quality? Am I selling efficiency? Am I selling timely deliveries? Am I selling sustainability? Am I selling ethical fashion? What is that sort of key value proposition that I'm bringing to the table that differentiates me from everybody else in the market, right? Again, because we only have 30 minutes, I'm just sort of running through these things in highlights, but there's a sort of there's a lot more depth that one can go into. And the next, I think I look at what do I need to make all of these things happen? So I've identified what I'm going to be producing. I've identified who I need to work with. I've identified, who my key partners are. I've identified what my sort of unique value proposition is. So what are the resources that I'm going to need to bring that about? There could be human resources, financial resources, money. How am I going to raise the money? Am I going to raise the money through family and friends? Am I going to get a bank loan? Am I going to seek equity funding? Am I going to seek grants? Just really setting out, how am I going to get the funding that's required? Human resources, okay, who do I actually need to make this work doable? Do I need to hire, production staff, or am I outsourcing production? Like I said before, do I need to hire a manager? Do I need an HR person? Like, who exactly do I need? And just really running through that process to identify and to highlight who exactly is needed in the team and what they actually need to be doing. And that's also really key, because sometimes we go on this like hiring frenzy and we hire people without having real clarity as to what their roles are and what they're supposed to be doing and what their KPIs would be. And so you have all this stuff, but you're not really producing results because there's a lack of clarity as to what their specific roles actually are. And then in terms of key resources, what else? So I've said financial resources, human resources, even like space. Do I have the space? Am I going to be leasing a premises? Am I going to buy land and sort of start my own, business from scratch? Am I going to rent? Am I just going to have a consignment, model? Am I going to sort of, have concessions in stores? What are those resources that I would actually need to be able to take my work into the market? And then speaking of the market, I then look at customer relationships, right? So who am I actually serving, right? What kind of customer relationships do I want to build? Like who exactly is going to be my customer base? And then that sort of feeds into customer segments as well. So who exactly in the market am I targeting, and what am I offering them? So for example, in my business, we have 3 different business lines that target 3 different segments of the market. The first is fashion brands. So we do production for fashion brands who kind of want to focus on design and outsource their production to us. So that's one business line. The other business line is uniforms. So we do uniforms, produce actually utility wear. So we produce things like uniforms for schools, uniforms for security businesses. We do overalls, coveralls, protective garments for different industries, especially industrial businesses. We do PPE for the health sector as well, and so on. And then the third business line that we're literally launching this quarter is basically basic apparel, where we have our own brand and we're producing basic, like really, really basic low-cost apparel, like really, really simple things like boxer shorts for men and so on. So those are 3 distinct customer segments. And it's really important to identify one's customer segments, because the marketing strategies that you're going to employ for each of these segments will be very, very different. So for just to give an example, like for my basic apparel range, if my target is retailers who sell in the markets or who sell in the markets, for example, I don't think social media, Instagram is necessarily going to be like one of my key, marketing tactics or marketing tools, just as an example. On the other hand, fashion brands, for example, that would probably be one of the key places that I would want to play in. Do you see? So it's really key to identify that because that would really determine a number of different things. It would determine the level of technicality that is involved in the production styles and so on. So for example, if you look at the standard Hermes scarves, at the edges, they're not sort of overlocked in the standard way. They're kind of hand stitched, right? Again, because that is for a luxury customer segment, then you kind of use different tailoring tactics or different tailoring sort of techniques for that, as opposed to if you were for the mass market, you would just overlock it and and be done with it. So that's that for customer segments. And then, I sort of touched on this inadvertently, but the channels, how am I going to reach my clients or my customers? Am I going to employ digital marketing, which is why it's really important to identify you to determine what marketing tactic or tool to use for each segment. So am I going to employ digital marketing? Am I going to employ door-to-door evangelism, so to speak, handing out flyers, that sort of thing? Am I going to employ network marketing, for example? Am I going to stock my products in stores? Am I going to open a store of my own? Am I going to use direct sales agents or distributors? What exactly would those channels look like? And then the last 2 areas that I sort of encourage people to touch on are areas that a lot of creatives don't really like to get that involved in, which is the the financial aspects of things. So first and foremost, is kind of like, what are my costs? And I feel like it's really important for all of these different things to be established even before going into business, because you might have the most creative ideas, but if you go through this whole process and it begins to become apparent that there's no real market for this product, or you're not going to make any money from it, then it's a good opportunity to actually rethink or revise the plan or the strategy before you actually spend all this money going to market in the first place. So the costs. So first and foremost, for example, if we're dealing with a fashion designer who actually designs themselves, do you need an extra design team? For example, what is that going to cost? What is production going to cost? And that would also be determined by where you want to do production. Are you going to do outsource production abroad? Are you going to go to China, for example? Are you going to produce locally in whatever country that you are? How does that affect the costing? Materials, where are you sourcing materials from, and what is the cost of those materials? So for example, if you're importing fabric, what is the cost of that import? And also like clearing duties. So for example, in my business, I've decided not to import fabric at this point for two reasons. One, we're not at the scale that I would need to import, bales and bales and bales and bales of fabric. So the economies of scale that you would be getting from importing probably, won't be that much of a benefit to me at this stage. Of course, there'll come a time when we will do that. And then secondly, those of us in Africa know some of the issues with customs and clearing. I just don't have the energy at this point in time to be dealing with customs agents and imports issues and all of that. So we import, so we purchase our fabric locally at the moment. But the point is, all of these different factors impact on the costing. Furthermore, premises as well. Are you leasing premises? What is the cost of that premises? For fashion brands, they like to, and it's ideal to kind of locate yourself in a really central place where you can be seen. What is the cost of that? What is the cost of the staff that you have? What are your sort of operational costs? Something that we often forget, servicing machinery can sometimes be cumbersome. What are the costs of that? So, utilities, insurance, which we don't talk about or even think about very often, and so on. So basically the idea is to just really sum up all the costs and then begin to assess whether based on all of the different costs that you have to incur to set the business up, it would actually be a worthwhile endeavor. And then the final thing is just really identifying, what are my revenue streams? Okay, so I want to design clothes, but what are the different areas that I can make money from? Can I partner with, say, influencers to do merchandise for them? Can I, which will be one stream of income? Can I design bespoke items for, say, celebrities or for, corporates? Can I do corporate gifts for them? A whole sort of, raft of different things. Just really beginning to identify, who, like how, what are all the different sort of, areas or streams that you can make money from. And so that's kind of like, how I like to look at it in the round, to really give me a sense as to, what the business of this fashion brand, the actual business, could look like, and what I need to consider, what I need to pay attention to, what I need to research before even beginning to expend a lot of resources. So yeah, so we've talked about, I said I was going to sort of break this down into three parts. The first part is what I called first principles, looking at the vision, mission, etc. The second part is what I've just gone through now, which is just really the meat of looking at the business model that you want to operate. And then the final part is, is the legal side of things, legal and regulatory and compliance as well. So, which often sort of, tends to get neglected. So looking at, so from a business registration perspective, in the particular jurisdiction in which I'm operating, what are the business licenses that I would need to operate, for example? What is the minimum wage in that country or in that city or in that state? Am I in compliance with all of those different things? What are the tax requirements? And I truly believe that it's always most beneficial to start all of these things early, because playing catch up later on is so much more difficult and so much more cumbersome. Imagine having to do accounts for like 3 years that you've been in operation because you haven't done them annually, for example. So understanding each of those different things, understanding the different, which is why when I spoke earlier about key partners, it's really important to understand, who you're working with and what sort of agreements you want to have in place with them. So for example, if you have, suppliers, do you want to have a supplier agreement? Granted, for many fashion brands who are operating like in Africa or in other sort of, underdeveloped or semi-developed, areas, you might not necessarily have like a massive supplier or like a big supplier. It might just be really informal, like you go to the market and purchase your fabric, in which case, the idea of having a contract is pretty much redundant. However, having said that, you could still have a sort of informal arrangement or informal agreement with your supplier. So certain key documentation, NDAs are usually the place to start. Before even getting involved in any sort of, in-depth discussion with the potential partner or, even client in some cases, and NDA is required. Like I said, supplier agreements, employment agreements with your staff. And this is not necessarily a legal document, but even like a staff handbook is also really important, because, if people don't know what the rules and regulations of your organization are, and they'll just behave anyhow that they like, and you can't really, penalize them for that because you haven't let them know in advance what the rules are. What else in terms of agreements? Yeah, those are some of the main ones that I tend to look at the outset. So yes, in a real nutshell, I was trying to keep within my time allocation. There you have it. That's the methodology that I use in terms of really looking at the business side of fashion businesses. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Abisade. That was a great presentation, and thank you for staying on time with that. At this time, we are going to have a Q&A session, first between Liz and Abisade, just a few questions for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to engage you, the audience. I see there are already some questions in the chat, so keep those questions coming. But also when it's time for the audience Q&A, you can also feel free to unmute yourself and ask your question. So I'm going to hand it over to Liz and Abisade now to take a few minutes of questions.
Thank you, Dochi. Thanks, Abisade, for your informative presentation. So I have a couple of follow-up questions so that the audience can basically contextualize some of these issues. I'll start with the issue of formalizing the fashion businesses. We talked about registrations, and I'd like you to just briefly explain further in terms of the kind of registrations that are available. What are some of the things they need to consider? Because some fashion brands decide, oh, I want to become an NGO or a trust and things like that. And basically just address how can they start if I'm on a low budget? How can I start? Can I transition from one registration to another and stuff like that?
Okay, great question. So first and foremost, the thing to say about that is it's going to be different based on the jurisdiction that you're in. Every country has its own business laws, and so you'd have to comply with those. In a general sense, the first thing is to determine how you want to structure your business. What kind of organization, what kind of corporation do you want to be? So I'm a UK trained lawyer working in Nigeria now. So Nigerian law is based on UK law. So I'll use that as an example. So for example, you can operate as a sole trader, for example, which means basically that there's no legal distinction between yourself and your business, right? So the monies that you earn come into your personal accounts because you're basically sole trading. Now, you could also register as a limited company, which then means that your business is a separate legal entity from yourself. And so what that means is that, you know, any assets or liabilities that your business has are treated, or that you have, are treated as separate and distinct, right? Now you have like things like social enterprises as well, where, you know, you can register as a social enterprise. And what that means is, you know, you are a for-profit business, or you have like a, you know, a strong social impact ethos. So whilst you're making money, you're also guided by, you know, like I said, a strong social impact ethos. I don't know why a fashion business would want to register as an NGO or you know, or as a not-for-profit. But anyway, you know, there's also that option as well, depending, or actually, you know, I guess it depends what you want to do. So for example, you know, in my business, we sort of saw that the training that we gave to our staff at the beginning was hugely beneficial. And so we started like a training institute, which is kind of a not-for-profit. So I guess it depends. It's, you know, that's also an option as well. So that's in terms of, you know, that's as far as registration requirements go. Again, it's really up to the business depending on your goals, which is why I always start from the vision and mission, what you really want to accomplish, that will determine, you know, how you register your business. Now you then have to look at, you know, specific business licenses. So for example, in some jurisdictions, if you're going to be operating heavy machinery, you need business licenses for that, depending on what area or what part of town your business will be located. You need a business license for that. And then, like I said, tax regulations as well. So for example, in Nigeria is a federal system. So you have like federal tax and you have state taxes as well that one has to be aware of.
Right, thanks for that. So the second question is, you touched about contracts and some of these contracts that you and your business sign. Could you emphasize more on the importance of contracts in the fashion business, especially for the kind of fashionpreneurs who are like, oh, you know, my tailors will be scared, they won't want to work with me, I don't want to scare them away, they're my friends, or I don't want to look mean. You know, those are some of the comments I always hear from clients. So I think it would be great for you to emphasize just the importance of some of these contracts and the kind of trouble they can get, they can save you from.
Right, hugely important. And I have to say, like, you know, I like to be transparent in these sorts of conversations because I think, you know, we all learn from issues. Even I, as a lawyer, I've been qualified since 2009. I've fallen victim to this lack of contract issue in the past, because sometimes you have clients come to you in a hurry. They're like, oh my God, we need this thing like now. Can we start tomorrow? It's very urgent, all of that. And in the midst of all of that, in the midst of really trying to get things moving and, you know, and all of that, you don't sort of sign the contract, or you miss something crucial. Well, maybe not miss, but you don't sign the contract because you just think, well, I know this person, let's just do it quickly. It's just a quick thing and, you know, we'll be over and done with. And then things go wrong. You know, I had a situation once where, so we produced 15,000 runners vests for the Lagos Marathon. And we had, so we had agreed, in fact, we actually had, so we didn't have a full contract, but we had like an invoice and documentation sort of recording how many pieces we were, you know, we were contracted to produce. And we'd agreed 15,000 pieces. 1 week to the delivery date, the client calls and says, oh my God, you know, we've started distributing all of these things. It's too much, it's too much, it's too much. Can we do 10,000 instead? By which time I've already bought all the fabric and all the materials that are required. Do you know what I mean? So it's hugely important because, you know, you really want to avoid any sort of, any avenue for back and forth, any avenue for disputes and so on. Now, in that same regard, sometimes what also happens is a customer, they will give you maybe their tech pack or whatever. And then after you've received all of those, they would now then start sending you changes via WhatsApp or via email or via text or whatever. And so what you now then end up with is you have the actual tech pack that they've given you, but they've now made all these several alterations all over the place in WhatsApp, in email, and then it becomes easy for things to fall through the cracks, right? Because they would now then say, or they could now then say, oh, that's not what I said. oh, go and check the WhatsApp from here. You might have deleted the WhatsApp message. So, it's just better to just have everything. How many items did they order? What are the delivery terms? What are the delivery dates? What is the price? What are the payment terms? All of these things need to be documented in one place. That's one. Now, as it pertains to employee contracts, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because my factory is located in I would say a semi-urban city in Nigeria. And so most of my staff are only educated to say about secondary school level. Like I have quite a young workforce. And so when we first started, so I trained all my staff from scratch. I got Sri Lankans to come and train my staff for 6 months. And I paid for all of this, and I was giving them a stipend as well. So it was very important to me to have some sort of a bond to make sure that people didn't just get trained and then, disappear. So I had agreements. I had lots of different questionnaires, guarantor forms, all these different things. And so I gave all my staff all of these things to fill. And I realized 2 weeks had gone past. I hadn't gotten any of these forms back. So I had I called a meeting with all my staff, and they began to tell me that they had researched me online, and so that I was a lawyer. And so they were afraid to sign the documents because if anything went wrong, I would come and arrest them and, all of that. So I then had to explain that, look, this is not about arresting you. This is not about, throwing you in jail or whatever. It's just the fact that, think about it. When people go to get trained, they pay. You guys are coming here. I'm paying you a stipend, a stipend to come here. So it's also important. So as you guys are enjoying this free training, it's also important to me to ensure that my money is not going to be wasted. That's why you are signing these contracts. So I guess the point is really education, right? Because we're not really in a society where a lot of people are used to using contracts in sort of everyday interaction. So there's some education elements that is also required.
All right, I'll ask the last question, and then the rest of the team can ask follow-up questions. So you mentioned consignment models. What are some of the considerations that a fashion entrepreneur needs to consider before they submit or get to an agreement with a consignment store? And I ask this because, like for us here in Kenya, consignment stores are huge because most of the fashion businesses cannot afford space. But some of them just tend to think, oh, I'll just drop off my stuff and I'll wait at the end of the month and I'll get some money. Yay, people can see me. So what are some of these considerations that they need to actually have in place when they're getting into consignment models?
Okay, so for me, the first thing I would say is not all publicity is good publicity. Not all partnership is good partnership. There's some partnerships that would literally run you out of business. And so I think it's really prudent to not be desperate, to just put your stuff, in any kind of place. You have to identify what it is that you want to get out of that agreement or out of that partnership or engagement. And I know, I'm not going to be naive. I know that, when people are starting off as fashion brands, it's difficult for you to kind of call the shots, right? As they say, beggars can be choosers. And so you have a lot of fashion brands who have this, oh, please take me. Oh, please choose me kind of, kind of mentality. But I think that one just really needs to be clear, extremely clear about the basis of this agreement. And you have to, whatever you end up choosing in the end is your personal decision, but you have to be clear as to what the potential pitfalls are, what the potential benefits are, and then make an informed decision. So many of these concession stores or consignment stores have, like different kinds of policy. Some of them would sort of, buy from you and then pay you what they've bought from you, and that's fine. Others will say, until you sell or until we sell, you don't get your money. But in those sorts of instances, you need to be clear. So how long are they going to hold on to my things for before I get them back if they don't sell? Do you know what I mean? In what, so for example, what is the marketing? Are they going to sort of carry out any specific marketing activities around my own brand? For example, what are the payment terms? How much am I actually getting? Because some of them would take as much as 50, 60% of the value of the sale. So it's just really being clear about, number one, how much am I getting from this? What are the payment terms and arrangements? Number two, what is the time frame for this payment? Number three, any sort of, special circumstances. If my things get damaged whilst they're there, what happens? Who bears the risk for that? And if you have multiple, if you're stocking your items in multiple stores, are there going to be price wars between each of these different boutiques, for example? Do you want to sort of regulate the price to say, look, my things are going to be sold at $200 per piece, and I want that to be uniform across all the different, what you want to avoid is store A selling it for $180, store B selling it for $200, and so on, so just really being aware of that. And then also, again, because many of these stores are probably more established than the fashion brands, and so, they probably have more watertight contracts. Review the contracts, with a fine-tooth comb. You want to avoid any kind of exclusivity arrangements that say, oh, you can only stock your things with us and nowhere else. Yeah, those are some of the considerations that I would highlight.
Awesome. So I'd like to throw it to Udochi, Sana, and Ko if she's here as well. If you have any follow-up questions before we move to the audience.
I think I'm okay. I'll let the audience, there are a few audience questions in the chat, so I'll leave the time for them to really take it on. Yeah.
Sana, what about you?
Same. I will leave. I'll let us use the time to answer some of the questions the audience has as well.
All right. So I'll start with a question from Jennifer. So Jennifer asks, identifying a business partner, how do you go about hiring an entrepreneurial partner, or CEO or COO or CMO?
That's a super, super, super important question, because I've also been bitten by, like my very first fashion business, which was in 2010. I set up a fashion brand, a fashion business because obviously I'm not a fashion designer, right? I'm a business person. So I set up a fashion brand with a friend actually who is a fashion designer. And you know how these things are, we didn't have any agreements. It was just really spur of the moment, just really excited. One day we're like, oh, let's set something up, all of that. And that kind of didn't work. That went pear-shaped. And I feel like I was a little bit scarred around partnerships from that experience. However, I do think that partnerships can be great, because now I run my business on my own, and I can testify to the level of grit that is involved instead of going it alone. It's a hell of a lot of work. Like, you literally are responsible for everything, right? You do everything, all of that. I'm not complaining. It's the path that I chose, and I'm thankful for it. I enjoy the work that I do. Having said that, we don't all know everything, right? So I guess to answer the question more directly, how do you go about identifying a person? I think it's really about identifying what your own skill sets are. What are you good at? And what are you not good at? And so the areas that you may want to get a partner in are the areas where you are not necessarily good at. So for example, for me, I'm a visionary. I can create something, anything out of nothing. Like the factory that I occupy today was literally abandoned. It was derelict. There was nothing happening here. It was run down. But when I saw it, I was like, I can create something out of this place. And I have. Now, when it comes to the nitty-gritty, every day staff are coming to meet you, all these little things, I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be involved in, there's some things I just don't want to be involved in. And so if I were to get a partner, it'll be somebody who is really strong in the, in those areas, right? Or for example, if I wanted to sort of transition into a fash tech business, for example, the obvious thing that I would need would be a CTO, a chief technology officer, because I'm not that sort of, technologically inclined. Do you see what I mean? So for me, it's about finding somebody with skills that are complementary to yours based on what your business as a whole needs. Now, in terms of personality type and all of that, For me, I would look for somebody who is willing to work as hard as you're willing to work. Because one of the key issues that partnerships often face is, oh, I'm the one who's doing all the work. They just come, they collect money, they don't really want to work. I'm the one who's driving everything, and yet we're sharing profits equally. And then you start having bickering, you start having issues, all of that. So I would say find somebody, A, who is equally committed to the vision that you have, who is willing to work as hard as you're willing to work. And I guess somebody who has, the temperament is also important as well, because there will be areas of disagreement between partners. But I think finding somebody who is mature and sensible enough to be able to discuss those differences and come up with a suitable solution that is aimed at driving the business forward. You don't want any ego trippers who are like, everything's about them and they have to get their way. That's just recipe for disaster. And what else? Those are some of the sort of key things that I would look at, really. So someone that you can, just like you're choosing a spouse, because like business partnerships are pretty much like a marriage in a sense. So the level of rigor that you go through to choose someone who you spend the rest of your life with is what you also want to do with the person who you're spending most of your business life with. Yeah, I hope that helps.
I think you nailed it on that one. It's like choosing a spouse. I think I wasn't about to top that up if you didn't bring it in. So I think that answer has been well put. Second question is, does Heritage Apparels do tech packs, cut and sew, and what are your lead times? Can you work with the designer remotely?
Can I work with a designer? Yes, we can. And in fact, as I mentioned briefly earlier, I had this fashion business. I was doing production in India, in Thailand, in the UK as well. And that whole process or journey kind of led me to setting up a garment factory of my own. And so the point in saying that is that fashion, the idea of solving the production problem for fashion brands is really why we exist as a factory today. And in fact, so one of the issues to be transparent, one of the issues that we had was really around operations, around like middle management, excuse me. So my machinists had been trained by Sri Lankans, but I realized that because we don't have an existing or a strong garment production industry in Nigeria, that's where I'm based, I'll speak for that. No matter how many years experience a tailor has, they don't have that sort of assembly line production standard experience. So I've literally had to hire expatriates to come and work as production manager and technical manager for us. They literally arrived last week, which is great. So to answer your question, yes, we're now starting to take orders for fashion brands, even in higher volumes now, because we've now sort of, beefed up our production technical abilities, so to speak. So yes, we do tech packs, and yes, we do production for designer brands now. However, just to say, so at the moment we're working on a CMT basis, which is cut, make, and trim. So designers are required to bring their own materials, and then we make them for them.
All right, I want to throw the floor to Vivian. I see her hand up. So Vivian, feel free to unmute yourself. You can put also your video and ask your question.
Okay, so let me switch on my video. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. And I'm really excited to be here. I think this is a wonderful initiative. I want to say that I'm really inspired by, let me see, I jotted her name down so I don't forget, Abisade's introductory speech, and then her running through her journey as one who transited from law into fashion. Apparently, sorry, I'm going on and on, but I would land with my question. So apparently, I'm also a lawyer, but I recently transited into fashion as well. And of course, listening to you, I found it very inspiring. And I'm hoping and I'm looking for an opportunity to possibly speak with Abisade to have an inkling, an insider inkling on how she has run her business and how she has thrived, you know, with the challenges that we have within the country, within the business, the unique challenges we have within the business as well, the business of fashion. And I'm really hoping for an opportunity to have a one-on-one with Abisade to discuss on issues surrounding the business, really. Thank you so much. So that was just what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer, I'd like you to ask one of your questions so that we can see you and we can hear your voice, because you have some pretty interesting questions that you have raised, very important questions. So Jennifer, if you do not mind, I'd like to give you the floor.
Okay, all right. My background is not really great, so I didn't plan on having my face being shown. Okay, I'll try and do my best. Let's see what happens. Okay. I asked a few questions. Abisade, I was meant to meet you a while ago when you started. I really applaud your venture. I've been following your journey as well, and hearing about that incident with your t-shirt. I remember when I came in to work with you, you were on that t-shirt project. So it looked like it went a bit funny for you. And then I didn't find you again. And I think maybe that's where your partner, you had maybe had problems with your partner. And then you had this expert lady who then contacted me, an expatriate who contacted me, but I was really bent on working with you, and I hope I will work with you soon. But this is great. Okay, I wasn't planning on talking. I look a mess. How does one get out of a contract where a promise to take a sole distribution of a brand to a region doesn't go as one expected because the person did not carry out their side of the deal, yet that company has branched out to other areas of business that are of interest? So I want to pull out from the agreement as a sole distributor, but still maintain the relationship with the person and hopefully, transition into the other area. How would I do that legally and in the most friendly manner without creating any issues? What should I do? What's the best way to go?
Wow. Okay. So first thing to say is that.
Can I take my camera off now, please? I'm a little bit embarrassed with the way I look. Shall we go ahead? Yeah. I can, right? Liz? Yes, thank you.
Yes, you can.
Okay.
Well, first and foremost, nice to see you. Well, not in person, but virtually, because we've spoken over the phone a couple of times. So a couple of things to say on that. First and foremost, that's a very, very specific question that would be specific to the jurisdiction that you're in, the governing law of the contracts that you signed, and so on. So I think that's probably something that you want to kind of seek legal advice for in your particular area. But a few general points. First and foremost, most contracts would have a termination clause. So they would sort of set out different circumstances under which either party can terminate the clause. And from what you've described, it appears that one party has breached one or more terms of the contract. So there could be sort of, breach of contract issue there. Secondly, this sort of agreements that you described should have what's called a non-compete clause or something to that effect, which basically prevents, so if you're entering into business with someone for a particular thing, that clause would prevent them from entering into another agreement, especially if there's exclusivity with somebody else or with another, party or whatever. Now, a general thing to say, even though I'm a lawyer, is that I feel like, and again, I'm glad that you mentioned that you want to do this in the most friendly way possible, because I think that sometimes when we have legal contracts, the first thing we want to do is, well, we signed the contracts, is not what the contract says. You can't do that, all of that. But I feel like, you know, it's more because again, relationships are everything in business, really. And so there are times when you have a legal right to something, but you may choose not to necessarily exercise that legal right because of what you foresee. Of course, it depends. There's some things where there's no option and you just kind of have to do that. So yeah, so I think I would say that the first step should be trying to resolve this negotiation, trying to resolve this in the most amicable way. So the first thing will be, what do I actually want? What do you actually want from this, what sort of outcome do you want from this incident, right? What would your non-negotiables be? Like, what are the things, what would the deal breakers be for you? What are the things that you may, you know, agree to compromise on and say, okay, fine, you know, you win some, you lose some, kind of thing. And then I guess also identifying what the other party wants, you know, and trying to do a bit of a trade. Okay, can I get what I want whilst they get what they want as well? It's an unfortunate situation that nobody's pleased with, but we are where we are. What are we going to do to get out of the situation? And just kind of have that sort of negotiation, again, like I said, knowing full well what it is that you want and, you know, what you would not go beyond or beneath, in a sense. And then I think those are the sort of main things that I would consider, because again, it depends, you know, as you've said, you want to carry on doing business with these guys. So it could be the fact that, you know, you might use that as a negotiation tactic to say, look, okay, this is what we agreed, this is what has happened now. I want to continue working with you guys. Can we sort of, you know, make a concession here? And then, you know, in future deals that we have, we can, you know, do X, Y, Z or whatever. Do you see? So I think for me, ultimately in business, there's a lot of negotiation and just human psychology involved as well. Just really trying to understand, you know, what each party wants. I hope that helps.
Yes, that does. Yes, that does. That confirms what I thought. Thank you very much. Thank you. I have another one here. So do you want me to go for it?
Yes, please do.
Yes. Okay, we talk a lot about collaboration. Collaboration is becoming a buzzword and something of interest. But legally now, is there something that, because it's a new thing in many ways for us, is there something that we should not overlook when we decide to either go into a collaboration, designer collaboration, or a collaboration with a key person in society? You know, so if I choose to do a collaboration with somebody, a key person in society, or a collaboration with a designer, what kind of legal, what should I not miss out? What terms should I not miss out in the collaboration contract? Off the top of your head.
So firstly, there are different types of collaborations, and it depends on what the objective of the collaboration is. So for example, you can have a joint venture where you just enter into a collaboration or an agreement for a specific project. So say, for example, you have, you have maybe a popular, you know, music artist putting together a show, right? You're a designer and you have maybe even me, for example, who is a manufacturer, and we say, oh, why don't we partner on this project? We could set up, you know, again, it's quite clear that this is for a specific project. We're not becoming business partners or collaborating, you know, with no sort of, you know, end date in sight. We could say, look, okay, let's set up let's enter into a joint venture agreement to say, you know, we're going to work together on this particular project. And so the terms of that contract will be very specific to that project. We'll describe what the project is, we'll describe what your role is, what my role is, we'll describe, you know, who's bringing what, you know, who is bringing the other, who is bringing money, for example, who's bringing designs, whatever. So in that sort of context, a couple of things that you'd want to think about, very importantly, it will be IP, and Liz will be the master of this, will be intellectual property. So who has the intellectual property rights to whatever designs are created? And even more complex would now then be if there's a collaboration between us in the design process, not just you're doing the design, I'm doing the production. But if we're actually collaborating, coming together on the designs, we have to determine who owns the IP to whatever outcome, like design outcome, comes out of that. So I think that collaborations are potentially good thing. Okay, so before I go on to a sort of general comment, with regards to popular people, let's just call them influencers for the purpose of this discussion. So collaborating with influencers, again, it's, for me, one of the key things is clarity. It's always super important to be very, very clear. What are we trying to do? Who is doing what? What are the things that are permitted under this contract? What is not permitted? I feel like when you already begin to introduce that level of clarity and granularity into your agreements, you already begin to minimize the prospects of issues. Now, so for like an influencer type, position, you would want to kind of, I think that, like I haven't worked with influencers before, but what I do know is that sometimes what the issue then becomes is about money. It's about splitting the proceeds of whatever this collaboration is. So that also needs to be clear. Who is getting what? On what basis? You don't want the influencer to have come and just showed their face, not done what they said they were going to do, and then still be expecting the money that is sort of, highlighted or discussed or agreed in the agreement. So who's getting what, on what basis, what do you have to do to be able to get that, and so on. So those are some of the things that I would definitely want to be considering. But again, a more general point. So I've just sort of talked about joint ventures, but there are other kinds of collaborations as well. Like you might want to collaborate on a long-term basis, in which case there are other considerations as well. Do you want to actually set up a company together with this person? Is it going to be a collaboration where you kind of work together on all aspects of your business? Or is there like a specific aspect that you need to collaborate with them on? In which case you want to kind of firewall the other parts of your business so that, they don't have access to, or they don't have any grounds to lay claim to any of the profits or whatever from the rest of your business. Do you see what I mean? So yeah, those are some of the points.
That was really, really good. Thank you so much. So obviously now I need a fashion lawyer to put that joint venture for me together. So please, you guys send it across. I'll leave Liz to ask the last question that I wrote in there because it pertains to all of you. And I'd like to hear from Sana and Liz and Abisade on the question. Is that possible, Liz?
All right, let me read it out. And then if you want to sort of sprinkle in or chime in, please do. Because I kind of am not sure how you want it answered, but I'll ask it.
Okay, I can ask it. Well, I can see Udochi's here from Bias, and I've been, My question is, because I need to know more about this word bias in Africa, in African fashion. What does that mean to you? And have you really ever experienced bias in African fashion or heard of anyone who had experienced bias in African fashion? And I'd like Sana, as well as Liz and Abisade, and anybody else who is here who's listening, if you could also contribute to this question, because it's a big topic, but I'm not hearing much coming out from the African community or the Black community. Bias in African fashion, bias, prejudice, discrimination. Yes.
I think Udochi will start with you.
Can I just say that Jennifer is actually a member of the Bias in African Fashion Advisory Team. So she's trying to stir a different conversation.
But I would like that we've got the right people here. We've got, and I know I would like to hear it. It's interesting.
Definitely. I think bias comes in different forms, conscious and unconscious. And I think from the conversations that we've had across the continent, particularly last year, there are themes that we've identified where people feel like there might be some level of prejudice, but again, if it's conscious or unconscious, that happens in the fashion industry on the continent. And so these can be things like your socioeconomic background. We've also heard, of course, about things around ethnic lines, which is not uncommon in Africa. So there are different forms of different ways in which bias comes in. People perceive bias to be at work within the fashion industry in Africa. But then also, if you look at the larger global industry, the way others perceive or treat those who are in the fashion industry in Africa is also another issue that can be talked about. So it's multi-layered, many facets to it. So at Bias in African Fashion, our goal is to, first of all, identify those areas and drive dialogue so that people can become aware and begin to address areas in which they may be acting with particular bias or prejudice, but then also to put in place events like this, sessions like this, projects like this that really kind of help to be proactive in making sure that people are actually taking the steps they need to protect themselves and do what they need to do to build up their businesses and their brands on a solid foundation. So I'll leave it at that. We have conversations around this topic regularly at Bath, Bias in African Fashion. So I invite you to join our email list so that you can be a part and share more of your own perspective if you felt that you've been felt any bias or prejudice on your own part while you have been in the fashion industry. We welcome you to share with us so that we can also include that in the data that we are collecting and the work that we're looking to do to further inclusiveness in the fashion sector in Africa. Sana and Liz, I'll let you guys answer if you want to.
Well, I can touch to the global perspective. I think for me, when I think of bias in African fashion, I think the idea that a lot of people have this perceived notion that craftsmanship in Africa isn't luxury, or the idea that African textile or design has like one unified look when we have various cultures, I mean, communities and textile. And so I think that's what I perceive based on my interactions with the global fashion sphere, is that people have those ideas of that one look, one African model look, or one type of fabric, or so I think it's just having that very narrow-minded view of African fashion.
Abisade, please answer, and then I can follow up with my answer.
I'm still thinking of the angle, because again, as Udochi said, it's really multi-layered. But I think for me, looking at it from a global perspective, because again, I've been, shouldn't I say privy to, or I have some sort of knowledge of kind of how the global intellectual property regime works. And I think that it is kind of, in a sense, designed to favor what is termed your traditional intellectual property, right? So a lot of the sort of techniques and methodologies that are used to produce African textiles, for example, are not protectable, at least at this point, for a number of different reasons, because they are not necessarily codified. Some of them are handed. So, like, for example, the part of Nigeria where my factory is basically the cultural home of Adire fabric, which is basically like tie and dye or batik. And that technique was handed down literally from generation to generation. So it's not necessarily codified anywhere. And so the current intellectual property regime that we have does not really recognize IP that has been handed down from grandmother to grandchild. Do you know what I mean? That's one. And then even things like, so for example, like, to kind of go into a different sphere, which is now becoming more relevant, medicinal things as well, like herbs and stuff that we have and that we grow here, and not really recognizable as IP, because again, how do you define who owns these things? And now with ethical fashion being on the rise and people starting to look for more natural alternative to chemical dyes, those materials are not sort of recognized either. So I guess the point I'm trying to make is that a a big part of, again, I don't like to be, I really don't like to get involved in these discussions around, that sort of portray us, say, in Africa as being victimized somehow. I have different perspectives on that, but I think it's fair to say that the international intellectual property regime does not really favor the kind of IP that we produce. That's a form of bias.
Right. I like how we all have interesting and different sort of thoughts and whatnot. And for me, I'd say I look at it from a point of one of the similar names that we would use in terms of favoritism. So for me, bias in African fashion means I favor African fashion, and basically trying to build trust, build hope in African designers that what we're doing is pretty awesome, and that we are also contributing to the global fashion industry. And there's a lot that they are that we are contributing. Basically, as Abisade said, there are some areas that IP law can still grow, and right now the TK-TCE conversation is happening, and WIPO and the international community is very aware that there's a gap, right? And they're hoping to create an international instrument that will cater to TK and TCEs. But while we're waiting for that, I think there are also other ways in IP that we can do it. And for me and my practice, we're always trying to get African designers to find that way, So, as we have seen today, the theme is, at the end of the day, you need a fashion lawyer, you need legal advice in your business. And if you've already identified your mission and vision, as Abisade pointed out, then it's much easier for even your lawyer to be able to help you make that come true. So for me, it's about favoring African designers. So at least I'm trying to curate my wardrobe to have at least 80% of African designs and counting. And whenever I travel to African countries, I'm buying fabric, I'm even buying ready-to-wear dresses and clothes, because I think we are a very rich continent. So for me, that's what it means. And I think we have a lot of potential. In the next 5-10 years, we'll be having a totally different conversation. I think we'll be taking over the fashion industry. So I don't think we have any further questions. If we do, feel free to raise your hand before I hand over to Udochi to close the session.
I think we had one person, RG. I'm not sure if he still has a question that raised his hand previously.
Yeah. RG said she had raised her hand by mistake.
By mistake, okay. Okay,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah, so, but
Great.
if you have any other questions, please raise your hand. You have like 2-3 seconds to raise your hand. Take advantage.
Let me just add something whilst we're waiting. So kind of based on all the different points that I made, I'm actually creating a curriculum in an online course for literally designed for fashion brands that really goes in depth into some of the things that I talked about, helping to kind of create a structure for fashion businesses and so on. So I'm kind of on a social media break at the moment, but feel free to follow me on social media to kind of get more information when this is ready.
All right, wonderful. So I don't see any other questions. So I don't know if you have any parting shots before Udochi can take the floor. Abisade, any parting shots?
Not particularly. Just really to wish everyone the best here, and just the key thing for me is just to be really, really business savvy and not get caught up in the creative elements alone, but to really treat your business as a business first. So it's a business first before it's a fashion business, in my opinion, because if you are not profitable, if you are not sustainable, then you will cease to exist. So business first.
All right, business first. Udochi, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Abisade. That was a great session. Thank you for the insights. I was actually going to ask you to share your details so people can know how to follow you on social. So please just take a moment to do that. And also, hopefully, when you have that curriculum ready, we can also use our network to share that for you, because for us at BAF, it's really about collaboration, working with others who are doing great work in the industry. So in as much as you're putting that together, it's something that we want to make available to those who are engaging with us to also take part of that and take advantage of it. So thank you so much again. So we're gonna be closing at this time. I also want to just take a few minutes to thank the entire team that has been behind this, or that's going to be behind the work that we're doing going forward. Again, I want to thank Liz of my IP Legal Studio. I want to thank Unkwo from the design brand Unkwo based out of Nigeria. And then also thank Sana of the Fashion Law Africa Summit for the work that they have put in so far in pulling this together and the work that we're going to be doing in future. And I'm going to bring up now Sana to close us out and to just talk a bit more about some of the events that we have coming up for the rest of the year.
Hi, everyone. So as Udo mentioned, we have some great events for you all to look forward to. We're hosting the Fashion Law Seminar, which is on February 26th, which will address some of the legal elements of starting a fashion business, as well as the best strategies to safeguard your brand assets. In April, we'll hold a clinic, and in the summer, we'll begin a legal advisory network. Dates are still being finalized, but if you do want to learn and join, please contact us through our email address, which is listed on the slide. I think, hold on. Yes, as you see listed on the slide, or through some of our social media channels as listed as well. We would like to thank you once again and express our gratitude for everyone who has joined us today, from all over, really. So thank you.
And just to clarify, the link on the slide is a sign-up link to join our email list. We will send an email following this, so that you can also know how to just email us generally if you want to get more information apart from what we'll be sending you directly. So to stay up to date with what's happening with this entire project, join our email list, and that is at bit.ly/African Fashion Legal email. And that is it. So this is the flyer for the session that's coming up in February. And we'll share that as well with you. If you registered, which you did have to register to join, we'll send that to the email that you used to register so that you can sign up for that segment coming up in just about a month. And that is it. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you, Abisade. Thank you, everyone in the audience, for joining. And we look forward to having you for more of these as we go through the year. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.